Good evening, everyone. I'm Pragati Singhal. Me and Anurag Pandey, students of Architecture 7th semester, welcome you all for today's webinar on Cultural Landscape of India, Ayodhya Reimagined. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Professor Amita Sinha. She is former professor of landscape architecture and South Asian studies in the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, USA. Her research is aimed at developing sustainable strategies towards planning and design for the future. She has been involved in planning and designing of heritage landscape, including the Taj Mahal in Agra, Gomti Riverfront in Lucknow, Ghats of Varanasi, and many more. Also, she has written a book on landscape in India, Forms and Meanings in 2011, as well as she is the co-editor of Cultural Landscape of South Asia. She has been rewarded with awards such as Bachman Research Award, Outstanding and Inspiring Leadership Award, Chicago, and many more. We welcome you, ma'am. Now, I would like to welcome our director and moderator of this webinar, Dr. Ela Gupta. She is an architect planner with specialization in earthquake disaster management. She has worked as consultant for organizations like UNDP, Government of Punjab, and Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. Previously, she has worked as director in MBS School of Architecture and Planning, Indraprasth University, New Delhi, as head of PhD program and of schools Sushant School of Art and Architecture, Gurugram. I would also like to introduce the coordinator, architect Deepika Verma. She is an architect, urban and regional planner. She has previously worked in Rajiv Awas Yojana slum development project. From last 6 years, she is associated with Amity University. Her research interest areas are waste management, community sustainability, slum development, and rehabilitation. Now, I request Dr. Ela ma'am to welcome our today's guest.
So I extend a very hearty welcome to you, Dr. Amita Sinha. I know you are in US and it's really early for you. So thank you so much for taking all the pains for talking to all of us here. A very hearty welcome to all the participants too, because you are interested in cultural landscapes, and we all know that India has a very rich built heritage. We have culturally and historically rich places, like we have temples, we have so many mosques, we have tombs, we have beautiful churches, we have cemeteries, we have beautiful forts and palaces. We have beautiful step wells in Rajasthan and Gujarat. We have rock cut caves of Ellora and lots of secular architecture. We have multiple layers of history of built environment, starting from the Indus Valley civilization. We have ancient Hindu architecture, we have Mughal architecture, colonial architecture, and there is lots of mix and influences of one another on all our architecture and on our cultural landscapes. India has 38 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, which is very high as compared to many other countries. Ahmedabad and Jaipur are identified as our heritage cities for their rich heritage. Heritage tourism also, heritage and religious tourism has also emerged in India a lot, and it fosters a lot of economic growth of that particular area. It gives a lot of jobs to the people. The infrastructure is developed, and as a result, the whole region and the nation grows on account of this. But sometimes it happens that we don't value something that we get very easily and very freely, and something like that is happening to our cultural landscapes. So I feel very sad to see state of many culturally very important places in our country, especially if you go to the small and medium towns. The situation in bigger cities is little different, but many culturally important sites in the smaller towns are always neglected. So I feel very happy when I see eminent researchers and academicians like Dr. Amita, who have been working tirelessly, passionately, and consistently for so many years for in this field of cultural landscapes of India. I have attended many of her lectures in the past, and I always found them thought provoking and very interesting, and I've always enjoyed them. The study of cultural landscapes is very important, since all of us, most of us are students here. So it is very important because they reveal so much about our evolving relationships with the natural world. So they do it through their forms, their features, and the ways they are used. They have so many dimensions. They are beautiful, they are scenic, they have economic dimensions, there are ecological dimensions to the cultural landscapes, and then there are social dimensions of how people are using these. They give us recreational spaces, they give us educational opportunities, and with the help of them, we individuals, the communities, the nations, we can actually understand ourselves better. So these days, cultural landscapes are at risk because we keep neglecting, or many times we are short-sighted for to incorporate all these landscapes, all these cultural landscapes in our development plans, in our master plans. So that's why we need to attend this lecture by Dr. Amita Sinha. We have seen her, many of us, like I have seen her study on Varanasi Ghats, which she has done. It was beautiful. So it was very sensitively mapped. All the activities were very carefully mapped and analyzed, and very sensitive, ecologically sensitive solutions which were proposed by her. So now we are really looking forward to see this presentation on cultural landscapes of Ayodhya, because not many of us have visited Ayodhya because of the long-lasting dispute and the court cases and everything. But now it is kind of getting more and more important. So we are really curious and to see the presentation, ma'am. And once again, welcome to this session, and welcome all the participants. And you can keep typing your questions in the chat box or in the question and answer session, and by end of the session, we'll take your questions. Thank you. Ma'am, you can start your lecture.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gupta, for such a warm introduction. Thank you, Amity University, Geetika Verma, Pragati and Anurag for putting this together. And so today I'm going to present on cultural landscapes with a focus on Ayodhya. This is drawn from my forthcoming book, Cultural Landscapes of India, Imagined, Enacted and Reclaimed, which is going to be published next month by the University of Pittsburgh Press. So the book is about how landscapes embody cultural heritage. It's about ways of seeing both landscapes and heritage, how heritage is enacted in spatial practices, thus ensuring the continuity of traditions. And it's about conservation in the form of reclamation rooted in culture and ecology. Ayodhya exemplifies these themes, perhaps more than any other pilgrim town in India. So today I look at the place of Ayodhya in both myth and history and its sacred geography. And I conclude with outlining a design approach towards the reclamation of its most famous and contested site, Ram Janam Bhoomi. So Ayodhya has been in the news a lot lately, with the Supreme Court verdict in 2019 paving the way for construction of the Ram Janam Bhoomi Mandir, and the Bhumi Pujan by Prime Minister Modi on August 5th. Then the media shows all these images of temple designed by the Ahmedabad-based Sompura architect family. The anticipation that once a temple is constructed, in 3 years or so, Ayodhya is going to be developed and millions of devotees would come and worship. So many projects were announced: a new airport, makeover of Ayodhya railway station, a new bus station, development of Ramayan circuit, renovation of Saryu Ghats, widening of Panchkoshi Parikrama Marg, an elevated bypass road to Ram Janam Bhoomi, and so on. The question arises, is this frenetic development going to preserve the landscape and its heritage? Or is it going to irrevocably alter it in an image of something else, a simulacrum? So to answer this, we must first examine what is the place of Ayodhya in the cultural imagination and in collective memory. Scholars such as Hans Bakker have told us that Ayodhya as we know today evolved in the last 800 to 1000 years only, and it was a result of imprinting of myths on its landscape. And this happened in keeping with the growth of Rama cult and the rise of the Bhakti movement in medieval India. So Ayodhya of ancient India presumably is lost to history, but preserved in cultural memories as an imagined landscape. Now, myths are believed to be fables or stories which may have a basis in reality, but are really considered works of imagination. And Indic myths, there's a vast corpus of myths. Especially Ram Katha is about the hero's journey to achieving the divine status. Now, to imagine is to form a mental image, to envision, and to create a vision in mind. So this ancient poem, Ramayana and Adi Kavya, the first poetic work of ancient India, has envisioned Ayodhya and the larger landscape of exile and the hero as ideal types. Ram, the ideal, a just and compassionate ruler, and his Ram Raja, a kingdom of Ram, is a utopian state where everyone is healthy, happy, and follows the dharmic code. So the settings of this allegorical tale can be studied as archetypal, that is, they lie behind the evolution and transformation of actual sites in a certain image. This is a historic process, and it's only partially documented in travelers' accounts and Mahamadhyas, which are part of the Puranic lore. So today I will examine the cultural landscape of Ayodhya as an image and as a place. As an image of Ram Raja, the perfect rule of the perfect Lord Ram, what is the relationship between the person and the place? How the attributes of one symbolized in the other? So Ayodhya is an actual place, of course, and it would be useful to study how its natural features were incorporated in a sacred geography that evolved into the revered devotional landscape of today. So in textual and visual representations, the images are kind of scanty. Although Ram Raja is a very powerful vision, guiding rulers through history up to present times. And the creation of this image in the cultural imagination represents a universal longing for a perfect society. Ayodhya is a place to have been lost and found time and again. And placemaking or place finding has become a cultural imperative, a quest for divinity in person and place. Valmiki's Ramayana describes Ayodhya as a fortified city on the banks of Saryu, 12 yojans, about 42 kilometers in length, 3 yojans, about 10.5 kilometers in breadth. He writes, it has handsome palaces with 7 courtyards each for members of the royal family, with streets for chariots and parks and gardens. According to Kalika Purana, it is laid out in the auspicious shape of a bow, like a Karmuka Mandal, along the river Saryu. Ayodhya is derived from the Sanskrit verb yudh, to fight. So Ayodhya means invincible, that which cannot be fought. And in fact, Atharva Veda uses it to refer to the unconquerable city of gods. Brahman Puran names Ayodhya as one of the most sacred cities. So Ayodhya is believed to have been founded by Manu, the progenitor of mankind, and ruled by the Ikshvaku clan, thus placing the city at the very beginning of time. Now, myths preserve collective memory and also its fallibility. So tradition of Ayodhya being lost and reclaimed time and again. In fact, Ram's earthly departure, along with citizens of the city, caused the first abandonment until his son Kush returns to restore the city. And this is narrated by the 5th century poet Kalidas in his Sanskrit poem Raghuvamsa. There's also a local folk tradition recorded in 1838 that the city was deserted upon the death of Rama's descendant, Bridwala, who was killed in the Great Mahabharat War. Vikramaditya, the king of Ujjain, rebuilt the city around 2000 years ago, presumably following another period of dereliction. So he cut down forests that covered the ancient ruins, erected Ramgarh fort, and built 360 temples. Now the image of Ayodhya, now a pilgrim town in the state of Uttar Pradesh, is that of a city of temples and sadhus. The landscape of water bodies, hillocks, Saryu riverfront has been the primary receptacle of the Ram legend. And this landscape emerged from myths anchored on sites and enacted by devotees. The sacred sites have reproduced the collective memories for the successive generation of devotees. Veneration rituals continued on the riverfront tirthas and kunds, including worship at Ram Janambhoomi, as attested by the European travelers William Finch in the 17th century and Joseph Typhon Taylor in the 18th. Ram Navami festival celebrating the anniversary of Ram's birth always attracted a large number of pilgrims who bathed and performed rites at various places described in the Sanskrit text Agastya Samhita, a 12th century text, as well as an Ayodhya Mahatmya, a compilation of legends, oral legends composed over 700 years between 13th and 17th century. So the number of pilgrims to Ayodhya has increased threefold from 5 lakhs in 2003 to 1.5 lakhs in 2014. Nearly 1.9 million pilgrims came to Ayodhya in 2016. So pilgrimage is an ongoing placemaking of the landscape through spatial practices. In semi-structured interviews that I conducted with Professor Shubhda Kamlapurkar of BNCA College in January and in October of 2018, we interviewed about 39 pilgrims and 34 residents, and we inquired about the purpose of the pilgrimage, the sites that they had visited, and their activities. And these are some of the pilgrim responses. We come to visit Ram Janambhoomi, we come to Ram Hanuman Gadi. In fact, Hanuman Gadi is even more popular than Ram Janambhoomi. We come to bathe in the Saryu, we do the parikrama. And why is Ram Janambhoomi important? Well, it is a holy site because this is where Sri Ram's Bal Leela occurred. Parikrama was done by Sri Ram and his family. Saryu has been here since the time of Chakrabarti Maharaj Dashrathji. What are the goals of pilgrimage? Well, to visit temples, to bathe in the Saryu, to learn about history, to celebrate festivals. They said, for darshan of Ayodhya Dham and kunds, which are mentioned in Vedas and Shastras, Ram is in Ayodhya as a Swarupa Bhagwan Narayan. Anyone who comes here is very fortunate. One person said, I saw Ramchandraji sitting outside when I was visiting Ram Janambhoomi. And we observe pilgrim activities. These are, darshan, snan, puja, parikrama, Ram Navami festivals and Ram Leela attract a large number of people always. So Ayodhya shares certain topographic features with other sacred cities such as Varanasi and Mathura. This geography then plays no small part in establishing these cities as sacred kshetras. They are located in peninsular regions surrounded by water on three sides. And I think the ancients in India chose these locations deliberately. Presence of water in swift river currents, lowland basins, and river confluences, which made it possible to consider the site as a ford, both physically and literally. The high plateau over the river confluences was a strategic location in forts and defensible settlement. And these sites provided a combination of natural features favored by gods of epic and Puranic mythologies. The hill river diet constitutes a landscape archetype that developed into a structure of sacred geography in India. So here we see the river Saryu, Ghagra, which has actually shifted its course over time. In fact, there is another stream called Tilodaki in the southern part. It can barely be seen. There are lowland basins in the southern part, which over time became kunds. The hillocks became, temples. The farmland, the forests in the southern part gave way to farmland. So Ayodhya Kshetra is outlined here. It's really marked by the footsteps of pilgrims doing the Panchkroshi. And Ramkot Parikrama, it takes one around what remains of the ancient fortress of Ram. Within Ramkot is Ram Janambhoomi site, about 69 acres acquired by Sri Ram Janambhoomi Tirth Kshetra Trust. Now, this preliminary mapping is based upon our fieldwork and also a close reading of Ayodhya Mahatmya. So Ayodhya and Saryu are said to owe their existence to Vasishtha Muni. Another story is that the eldest son of Brahma, named Swambhu Manu, went to his father, asked for a place to live, and Brahma took him to Vishnu, who bestowed this wonderful and splendid Ayodhya, which was built by the divine architect Vishwakarma. On the northern part are the cluster of sacred sites on the Saryu riverfront. The story goes that Vishnu shed tears of joy when he saw Brahma engaged in his worship. Brahma gathered these tears in a palm on his hand and kept them in a wooden vessel. The sage Vasishtha solicited Brahma to have a holy river, and Brahma gave him the waters that had flown from Vishnu's eyes. So that is why Saryu is also called Vasishti, because sage Vasishtha brought her to earth. The first sacred place in Ayodhya is the Swargdwar, the gate to heaven. In fact, the shift of Saryu buried the ghats and the burges in silt until in 1985, an irrigation canal was constructed and the site was reclaimed as Ram Ki Pauri designed by the late landscape architect Rabindra Bhan, which is, you see the image in the center. It has the famous Nageshwarnath temple. Again, the story goes that Kush, son of Ram, was bathing in Saryu when his Kangan was carried off by Kamodati, the sister of a serpent. And when Kush threatened to dry up Saryu, Shiva appeared and asked Kush to forgive the serpent and marry his sister. And Shiva has been there since then. New ghats have been built on the flowing river, and they're used by a large number of devotees. There's Kaliram Mandir, Tretaka Thakur, dedicated to Lord Ram, who, as the Lord of Treta Yuga, had conducted the Ashwamedh Yag at that spot. Lakshman Kila and the ghats Pap Mochan and Rin Mochan, Raj Ghat, and further lower down are a series of ghats along the Saryu. The Ram Court precinct represents the city on the hill, an ancient fort from where Ram ruled over his kingdom. And the palaces within this fort were the residences of Dashrath and his wives, and of Ram and Sita. According to Hans Bager, the earliest place deities guarding the fort, which were Yakshas, Ajit, Matgajendra, and Bhairav, then gave way to the monkey warriors of Ram Katha by the 16th century, as the rise of worship of Ram as an incarnation of Vishnu began. The eastern gateway of Ram Court is now Hanuman Gadi, where Hanuman is worshipped as the caretaker of Ayodhya when Ram left for his celestial abode, Saket. The mounds on the southwest and southeast are Kuber Tila and Sugriv Tila, respectively, with the tilas of Nal Neel and Angad between them. There are other sites, Sita Rasoi, close to Ram Janam Bhumi, Kund, such as Dandhavan Kund, where Ram and his brothers used to brush their teeth, Vibhishan Kund, Praspati Kund, Vashisht Kund, hillocks and water bodies, which have now been transformed into temples, into kunds. The cluster of sacred sites south of Ram Court is largely in farm fields that would have been forested before the land began to be cultivated. Mani Parvat actually had a Buddhist monastery. Now the site is fully claimed by Ram legend. In fact, Mani Parvat is believed to have fallen from the hill with the Sanjeevani booty that Hanuman was carrying to Lanka. Nearby is Ashok Vatika, where Ram and Sita spent their leisure hours. It was filled with fragrant trees and flowering shrubs. In it is Sita Kund. Vidya and Ganesh Kunds are in the vicinity. Further west are a number of other kunds named after Dashrath and his wives. Ramayana circuit includes Gopuratra Ghat on the west, where Ram and Ayodhya citizens took Samadhi on the river Saryu. To the south is Nandigram, where Bharat lived during Ram's exile, and Makhoda on the north, where Dashrath performed the Putri Yashti Yagya with the help of sage Rishi Rishranga. Now we look at Ayodhya in history. archaeological evidence and travelers' accounts identify the location of Ayodhya as the ancient Saket city, a marketplace town at the junction of two important roads, the Shravasti Pratishthan North-South Road and the Rajgriha Varanasi Shravasti Taxila East-West Road. It was a city, Saket was a city in Koshal Kingdom ruled by Prasenjit in the 5th and 6th century BC from Shravasti. Jain texts and Buddhist texts, Jatakas mention Saket as the capital of Koshal. Buddha resided at Saket as a Buddhist text note. Ayodhya is also the birthplace of 5 Jain Tirthankars, including the first one, Sri Rishabdev or Adinath. After the decline of the Mauryan Empire, Saket came under the rule of Pushyamitra Shunga, and it was a prosperous town during the Kushan rule. Now, Saket enters the pages of history as Ayodhya when Gupta kings became devotees of Vishnu and moved their capital from Patliputra to Ayodhya in the 5th century. In fact, the Chinese traveler, 5th century Chinese traveler Fayan found only ruins of Buddhist buildings then. Skandgupta assumed the title of Vikramaditya and issued coins, copper coins, but he was also a patron to Buddhist scholars like Vasubandh, who built 3 monasteries. And the 7th century Chinese traveler Huan Zhang describes stupas and monasteries in the city. When the Huns led by Mahirkula invaded the Gupta Empire in the 6th century, Ayodhya lost its preeminence to Kannauj. And between 650 to 1050, there are no inscriptions or texts on Ayodhya recompiled. Now, inscriptions recovered from the demolished ruins of Babri Masjid, the most famous of which is the Hari Vishnu inscription, written in 12th century Devanagari script, engraved on a 5 feet long, 2 feet wide, 2.5 inches thick slab of buff sandstone. And it describes the Vishnu Hari temple built in the temple city of Ayodhya in Saket Mandal. Line 19 describes Vishnu destroying Bali and the 10-headed Dashanan. It states the temple was built by Meghsut, a vassal of Govind Chandra, of the Gadwal ruler. So with the rise of the Gadwalas in the 11th century, temples were built again in Ayodhya, including the one at Ram Janambhoomi. In fact, Chandradeva, the first Gadwal ruler king, visited Ayodhya as a pilgrim in 1933, as mentioned in copper plates. He bathed in Swagdar Tirth on the river. So we see temples in Saryu River front being built and surviving until 17th century. Ayodhya's importance as a pilgrim center begins to grow. So it then becomes a target of Islamic iconoclasm, beginning with Salar Masood's invasion in 1034, followed by that of Muhammad Ghori in 1198. It becomes part of the Islamic Sultanate in 1226. It was ruled by the Sharkis from Jaunpur after 1394, and then by the Lodhis from 1479 to 1526. Then Babur had a mosque built in 1528 at the instigation of a local Muslim Pir, Fazal Abbas Musa Ashikan, and he appoints Mir Bakht Tashkandi as the first Mughal governor of the province of Awadh, with Ayodhya as the capital. So there's another round of temple destruction occurred during the 17th century when Aurangzeb built 2 mosques at the Swagdar Tirtha on the Saryu, where once Vishnu shrines built by the Gadwara rulers had stood. Alexander Cunningham, the founder of Archaeological Survey of India, surveyed Ayodhya in 1862 and 63. And he and his successor, Aloy Anton Führer, identified the mounds of Mani Parvat and Kuber Parvat as sites of stupas. Sugriv Parvat was actually the site of a Buddhist monastery described in Huan Zhang's writings. And this map actually shows Mani Parvat and Lakshman Ghat on the old Saryu bed. It also shows Faizabad, cantonment, and Gupta Ghat. So the Shia rulers of Awadh ruled from Faizabad, and they later shifted their capital to Lucknow. With the independence of Awadh from the Mughal rule, temple building once again began at pilgrim centers. And at Swargdwar and at Hanumangadi, temples were built by Hindu ministers of the Nawab of Awadh. In fact, Kanak Bhavan, the palace of Ram and Sita, was built by the Queen of Orcha, Brishvan Kubari, in 1891. New institutions, Chavnis, mutts, and sectarian temples of the Ramanandi sect began to flourish, and they received patronage from rulers of small Hindu kingdoms later, and later by rich merchants and traders. The presence of Ram Chabutra and Sita Rasoi in the outer courtyard of Babri Masjid in the late 19th century attested to Hindu attempts to reclaim Ram Janambhoomi, which intensified under colonial rule and once reign of Shia Nawabs ended. In 1949, a group of devotees broke into the mosque and placed the Ram deity below the main dome. The reclamation of Ram Janambhoomi was taken up in earnest in 1984 by Vishwa Hindu Parishad, and the foundation stone of a new Janmsthan temple was laid in a Shilayana ceremony in 1989. The Rath Yatra of BJP leader Ramakrishna Advani in 1990 brought in its wake civic unrest and thousands of deaths. On 6 December 1992, Karsevaks destroyed Babri Masjid with mattocks, axes, and rods. So land was acquired around the Ram Janambhoomi site, and litigation began as to who owns the site. Hindu claim rested on the faith-based premise that this is the actual birthplace of Lord Ram, and devotees should be able to commemorate his descent on earth, whereas the Muslims argued that the mosque had stood at the site for 464 years, and its destruction proved the failure of the site in protecting the heritage and ensuring that Muslim community in Ayodhya has a place to worship. So Ram Court, excavated by A.K. Narayan in 1969-70, B.B. Lal in 1975-76, showed the presence of black polished ware, indicating an urban settlement dating back to the end of 6th or first half of 5th century BC. Excavations in June 1992 on the 2.77 acres of land leveled after the demolition of the masjid unearthed 40 sculptural and architectural remnants. 14 black stone pillars with carvings indicating a style datable to 11th century CE were used at Swolia and Babri Masjid. ASI undertook further archaeological excavations in March 2003 by digging 90 trenches in and around the area of the demolished mosque as directed by the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court. The excavations revealed 7 strata, the earliest dating back to 1st millennium BCE. Stone and brick construction was evident in the Shunga period, which is 2nd to 1st century BC, in the Kushan period, 1st to 3rd century CE, terracotta figurines and copper coins from the Gupta era, 4th to 6th century. The 5th period, that is 7th to 10th, was indicated by circular brick shrine with a water chute. The 6th period, 11th to 12th, by a 50-meter long wall, and the 7th, 12th to 16th centuries by a 50 by 30-meter pillared hall over which Babri Masjid was constructed. So the place of Ram's birth is a site of hierophory, a manifestation of divine, where Vishnu took avatar in the human form in the Treta Yuga. Its sacred energy is embodied in the Swambhu deity, that which the ritual of Pran Pratishtha is believed to be a living entity to be worshipped with reverence and devotion. The place as deity has not only great powers, but it's also a juridical entity as recognized by Indian courts since colonial times. The deity is considered to be a minor, Ram Lala, whose interests can be represented in lawsuits over the disputed site. So Ram Lala Virajman, Ram Lala seated, is a place deity. So the Supreme Court then in 2019 ruled in favor of building the Ram Janambhoomi temple at the disputed site. The court ruled that archaeological evidence showed that Babri Masjid was constructed above the ruins of an un-Islamic structure, and that Muslim parties had failed to establish exclusive possession since Hindus had worshipped Ram inside the mosque since the 19th century. The courts so appeared to be drawing upon both myth and history in adjudicating the case. In this way of seeing Ayodhya as a representational space of Ram's birth and his continuing presence invoked through rituals, and a space of representation, an archive of material artifacts that establish a chronology of occupation. So as the Ram Janambhoomi temple is being built on 10 acres, the site planning of the remaining 59 acres becomes hugely significant and symbolically represent the place deity or the place as person. So while Ramlala will be worshipped in an iconic form in the temple built according to traditional Vastu principles in the Nagara style of architecture, how will the surroundings reflect his character and personality? So here these three visual representations of his personality. As in the Ram Darbar, he is the ruler of Ayodhya, presiding over his court with his wife Sita, his brothers, and Hanuman in attendance. His kingdom is Ram Rajya, where everyone is happy, prosperous, and healthy, over which he rules as a compassionate and just king. He is Maryada Purushottam, the supreme man, the man who achieved divinity, and whose behavior epitomized honor and righteousness. As the Avatar Ram, as an Avatar of Vishnu, he's also the warrior Ram, who vanquished demons, especially the powerful ruler of Lanka, Ravan. He's invariably seen in a warrior pose with a bow. He's a world conqueror, a slayer of evil in this earth. In this 19th century Champa painting, he is the Tapasvi Raja, the king who is an ascetic. His renunciate persona exemplified by his 14 years of exile in the forest, by his education in the ashram of his guru Vashisht, and his sojourn as a protector of Brahmin sages from the demons of wilderness. These roles, the roles that he played as Vishnu's avatar, the king, warrior, and renunciate, are multiple facets of his personality associated with landscapes. Ayodhya, Darbar, Ram Sabha in Ayodhya, the battlefield, and the Tapovan. And these iconic representations are of the person and of the place. So in the survey map of the 69-acre site where the temple is being built, we see that it is not a completely leveled site devoid of any traces of the past. Besides the sacred structures, the Sita Rasoi, Sita Koop, Manas Bhavan, Anand Bhavan, there are wells, there are tanks, there are trees. There are 3 hillocks. Kuber Tila, also a historic site actually, where 2 freedom fighters were hanged in the 1857 War of Independence. The Nal Neel Tila and Angad Tila are named after the monkey warriors who built Ram Setu to Lanka, and Angad Tila, who was an emissary of Ram to Lanka and heir to Kishkinda kingdom. And these represent the presence of their presence in Ayodhya as guardians of Ram court. So thus Ayodhya's cultural landscape, including the Ram Janambhumi's site, epitomizes events that took place outside Ayodhya through place names, toponymy. So it's not clear how the site is going to be designed. Media images, the walkthroughs that we saw broadcasted at the time of Bhumi Pujan, show exhibition galleries and museum buildings covering most of the site, with generic open lawns with a sprinkling of trees. The images of a grandiose monumental complex along the lines of Akshardham. In fact, the site plan published by India Today does not show any sacred places or existing temples. The site is a blank canvas with no history of its own. So what I've talked about so far is that Ayodhya is a mnemonic landscape replete with place legends that bring Ram and his parivar and other characters of Ram Katha in the here and now. It's a pilgrim landscape renewed by traditional practices of circumambulation, bathing, and other worship rituals, an enactment of Ramayana. Ram Janambhumi is an integral part of Ayodhya. It's not a standalone site. And as such, iconic images of Ram and the places he and Sita inhabited, the Tapovan and Ashok Vatika, should be reinterpreted for Ram Janambhumi to be an allegorical landscape that will embody the rich cultural heritage. The Panchkoshi Parikrama was first, as we know, was first done by Ram, Sita, and Lakshman when they left for their forest exile. And in their wanderings through the forests they covered large tracts of the subcontinent. These landscapes became, part of Ramkatha. For Ayodhya and Ram Janambhoomi to be a living site of Ramkatha narrative, these circumambulatory routes can be the generative tool for a landscape structure to emerge with an iconographic program. So this will give the pilgrim an opportunity to experience the narrative landscape in circumambulations around the temple, around the tilas. The concept of Ram Janambhoomi, a grand monumental core set within a landscape park, which is the Ramkatha Kunj, designed around the three sacred tilas of Kuber, Nal, Neel, and Angad with their kunds. There's, of course, the museum and research center, parking for that, dharmshala, cottages for saints and other visitors, all tucked into the periphery, leaving large open spaces for festivals, rituals, and Ramlila enactments to take place. The monumental core of the site would, of course, be the Ram Mandir facing east, Sita Koop and Sita Rasoi, as well as Manas and Anand Bhavans. The soaring temple spires over 5 mandaps would be the grand structure dominating over the site and the rest of Ayodhya. But here I use landscape typology surrounding the temple. So there is a nakshatra vatika consisting of circular bands of trees within a square enclosure, Ashok vatika north of Sita Rasoi and the proposed Bhoshanshala, the Pushp vatika for growing flowers for the temple, paved courts, shops selling ritual items and pilgrim conveniences which are threaded on Arrival Avenue begins from the main road leading to Saryu River front. In the southern part of this landscape park would have open spaces for festivals, Ramlila, and for pilgrim experience of the narrative landscape. Here the typology would be clearings within groves of people, banyan, neem, and mango. The tilas with kunds, that is a type found all over Ayodhya, Kuber, Nalil, and Angad tila, each would have its own kund to collect runoff and harvest rainwater. There would be a Rangshala, an outdoor amphitheater for large gatherings of devotees during festivals such as Ram Navami, the Maidan for holding Ramlila, Sarovar or a lake as a major source of water supply instead of getting water all the way from Saryu, pavilions and mural walls for depicting legends, the museum and convention center, parking lots for 300 vehicles, a visitor parking lot, the Dharamshala, an Atithi Graha for visiting saints and other dignitaries, and the trail system for pilgrims on foot. They can be on golf carts also, including circumambulatory paths around the tilas and through the groves, reminiscent of parikrama margs around Ayodhya and around Ramkot. So Ayodhya is Ramnagri, a living heritage town full of pilgrims and sadhus, and the built environment of temples, dharmshalas, mutts, and chowdis on narrow street has evolved over the last few centuries. However, underlying it and within it remain the sacred sites and their remains, celebrated in Ayodhya Mahatmya, that are imprinted with legends and are settings of commemorations of Rama's deeds. It's this network of sites, receptacle of collective memories, that should be the focus of conservation efforts. They are Ayodhya's heritage, lost and found again and again. They constitute a narrative landscape, actual physical settings that affirm landscapes of imagination, and they reconcile myth and history. So with this, I'm open to questions and comments as they come.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a beautiful presentation. We all were so engrossed in it, like we didn't realize it finished. So, yeah, ma'am, we feel so connected with this because of this lockdown. There was this famous serial Ramayana, which we watched all over again. I think all of India watched all over again, and even the kids and children, and I'm sure these college students. So we all could actually identify, and it was very beautiful and very rightly said that this site planning has to be very, very carefully done now, because there are very important decisions will be taken by the authorities now. So we have, okay, so nice, we can see so many compliments in the chat box. People actually enjoy. So there are certain questions. If Pragati, you can come on camera and ask them.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, first question is, according to your opinion, what is the basic cultural difference between India and other developed countries?
What is the basic difference between India and?
Other developed countries, the cultural difference.
With reference to sacred sites?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Abraham religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they are centered in very, the center of the universe is, Mecca or Jerusalem or Rome. But India has a network of sacred sites, and there is a spatial transposition and duplication. So these network of sacred sites cover the subcontinent, and these are sites which are visited by millions of pilgrims. So um, this is, a very great kind of imprinting of myths over the land of the subcontinent. In the Western world, we see the cities growing, evolving as a result of mercantile interest, political centers, and yes, the churches, our neighborhood churches, they are, meant for the community. They do not celebrate the inherent sacredness of the site as is done in Hinduism.
Um, Second is, can you please suggest any idea regarding designing eco-friendly riverfront?
Yes, that is a very important question. Uh, so, we have to let the river be. And my extensive study of Varanasi riverfront has convinced me that yes, that now the ghats have been built. They are meant for the devotees to access the sacred river Ganga, and in case of Ayodhya, Saryu. But let the river spread. The river, recedes and it rises. So we have a whole cycle of the monsoon cycle, and we should accommodate this rather than trying to hold the river off. So by building, more and more walls to try to retain the river, um, we're not really we're not really doing any good, to 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 um, uh, to preserve, to conserve the landscape. So I would say that the eco-friendly design would be to design with the flow of the river, to let natural vegetation, especially on the other bank, on the um, convex side of the river flow, not to overbuild, and this is a way forward, rather than making everything pakka and concrete and um, building huge structures and disturbing the river ecology.
I must add, ma'am had suggested very interesting eco-friendly solutions for the Varanasi guards. So I think all those studies are also available. So maybe the person who is asking the questions can refer to them. Yeah. Next question.
Is religious culture important for a developing country?
Say that again.
Is religious culture important for a developing country?
Well, religion is an escapable part of life in India, right? And culture is so intertwined with religion. Um, so there's no, as I said, inescapable and no escaping from it. And India is a land of many religions, and hopefully, Ayodhya will be a place which will be welcoming, of other religions. Uh, Sikh gurus have Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism all find a place, and Islam too. There are mosques, there are mazars. And so, this is in a secular country, in a country and the nation state that follows secular principles as enshrined in the constitution. We should also keep in mind that secularism means pluralism. And pluralism means that, we need to be cognizant of the fact that many religions have laid their claim, some contested, as in the case of Ram Janambhoomi, but others, shared. Sites have been shared.
Ma'am, Shreya from the audience wants to know, could you please explain the mapping process?
Well, field work. And I really do want to go back to Ayodhya and do more work. Field work is the only answer, which means that you have to sweat it out, we have, we have our hands and feet and eyes. Google Earth, of course, is always a great resource. I think Government of India has, GIS files for almost every part of the country, but they are not always in the public domain. So we have to make a very concerted effort to share, what has been surveyed by institutions with the public at large. So between photographs, visual photographs, which are like, views, aerial views, survey maps, and Google Earth, you have to painstakingly make, your maps, and then discover, what lies on the ground, and go from there. As I keep saying, no site is a blank slate. There's always a lot going on, and the challenge is, how do you integrate, that into a vision for the future.
Yeah. Ma'am, Nikhil Devkar from the audience also has an interesting question. He wants your opinion about how different religions present in Ayodhya will be affected after the temple is built. So it is, what do you think about
I
it?
cannot
Yeah.
really say for sure. I would hope that they would continue to hold their ground. They would not be overwhelmed. And we have, I think, an act that no religious place will be converted to some other use or to another religious use, right? There will be more temple building for sure, but I will keep hammering on this point that we cannot let the natural features, the water bodies, and the hillocks to disappear. Let us not overbuild the Ayodhya, because with that would be the disappearance, of site-based legends.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Ma'am, there is a question from Subhashri. What is your opinion about the present development, whether it is going hand in hand with the present heritage or overriding it?
Well, my impression is that the top-down development is really not really looking at the ground reality, and it is infrastructural development. It is, building, overbuilding, very wide streets, bypasses, and so on. So I think we have to adopt a different strategy in pilgrim towns, because here, these towns have a very different scale to them, and they are riverine towns. So beyond, highways and sanitary treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, which are necessary, but if we can work out some combination of top-down and bottom-up approach, that would be ideal.
Ma'am, next question is from Nitish Kumar. At what extent cultural landscape planning is important in city development, and do we have any such guidelines in India?
Well, I think cultural landscapes are very, very important, especially in heritage towns and pilgrim towns. What kind of guidelines do we have? I do not think we do have any we have acts for protecting heritage, the Ancient Monument and Sites Act, which protects up to 500 meters around a heritage building. But what acts do we have for landscapes? There is the riverfront. I think you cannot build like within 500 meters of the river like Ganga. We have the Coastal Regulation Act, again, not building within the buffer zone of the ocean. But besides these, I don't think we have any acts. There's a Forestry Act, of course, for protecting uh, uh, forests and wildlife. So I think then landscape designers and planners should spearhead, this campaign to have more regulations, more regulatory bodies in municipalities. Some of the cities now do have a heritage cell in their municipalities, which made it possible for cities like Jaipur and Ahmedabad to get the World Heritage status.
Yeah. Is one more question. In the whole restoration project, will there be use of restored artifacts found in excavation?
I think so,
I
yes.
think, yeah.
They're already displayed, actually. There is a museum on the Saryu riverfront. I visited it in 2018, and I think they will be now transferred to an on-site museum. There were a lot
to see them.
Yeah, there were a lot of fragments, I think, and they were just kind of just collected and kept somewhere. Some of them around for public display. So the history will be told for sure, and it's well documented in.
So one last, I think maybe we can take this. Can we get the PPT and all the narratives mailed to all the attendees? So I would like to tell that this lecture will be available on YouTube very soon. So maybe after 10 days or so, this will be uploaded on YouTube, so you can access it anytime. And also ma'am's book. Yeah, ma'am, would you like to tell them about your book?
Yes, I mentioned it in the beginning, and this chapter on Ayodhya. The first chapter is in Ayodhya, and so this presentation is partly coming from Ayodhya plus work that I've done since then. The book will be published next month. It will be available on Amazon. I hope your library can get a copy. It's also going to be available as an ebook. It has chapters on Ayodhya, Dwarka. So I look at forts, and I look at gardens. I talk about memory, especially memory of famous women in India and how memorial landscapes celebrate that. And then finally, I end with ecological approach to cultural landscape conservation.
We'll look forward to that book, ma'am. And maybe now we can close the session as the time is almost up. Yeah, Gitika.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. So I would like to thank our respected speaker, Professor Amita Sinha, ma'am, for her excellent presentation. The webinar was very informative and comprehensive. I appreciate and value her experience, talent, and insight in this area. I would also like to thank our director, Dr. Ella Gupta, ma'am, for her initiative in organizing such webinar and giving us opportunity to have expert interaction. Thank you, ma'am. And special thanks to the students, faculties, and all those who have attended today's webinar on cultural landscape of India, Ayodhya Reimagined. So my gratitude towards Amity University Gurgaon and our IT support team for providing the platform and helping us in the successful completion of such event. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Pragati and Anurag, for managing it so well. Yeah, and thank you so much, Professor Amita, once again.
Right, good.